And our friend Larry Johnson is back with us. Welcome back, Larry.
Here we are. The battle of the shirts continues. Nima versus Larry. Yeah, well, okay, look. We have to do something to try to lighten the mood because all the subjects we're talking about are so damn depressing and so dangerous. So, I broke out the Australia shirt today.
Yeah, that's a,
Kangaroos on the
that's a
loose.
big move, Larry.
Kangaroos on the loose.
Let me start, Larry, with the expectations the expectation that many people have or hope that they have toward the meeting between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. And we know that Europeans are somehow opposing, they're talking about no talk about the territory and without Ukraine being part of the discussion. They don't agree. Donald Trump somehow, to me, he's so confused. He doesn't know what is the depth of the talks that he's gonna face when he talks with Putin. And here is what NATO Secretary General Rutte said about the concept on the part of NATO, or maybe himself. I don't know. So he's talking about the can be de facto, not de jure, and he's talking about. I don't know if that was a good sign to talk about Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia. Go ahead, Larry.
Well, it all goes back to the West trying to portray this as a territorial dispute between Ukraine and Russia, and that it's just a matter about negotiating over terrain, over who controls what piece of land. That's not how Russia views it. For Russia, this is a confrontation with the West over NATO expansion. And the West, since 1995, has been relentlessly moving towards the East, attempting to surround Russia with NATO members, bringing in states. And they are continuing to do it, which we saw, on Friday with the signed agreement between Armenia and Azerbaijan that was brokered by the United States. There are reports out that there was a secret part of the deal that both Azerbaijan and Armenia eventually are going to be offered to become members of NATO. Again, Russia will not allow that. Those are pissant countries. They're tiny. Russia is not going to sit back and become a target of the United States and the West, who want just one thing. They want to. I've used the word before. It's a strong word, but it's rape. They want to completely violate Russia, break it up, steal its resources, subjugate it. And I think Russia, the Russian leadership, even Vladimir Putin, appreciate that. So what's going on with respect to Ukraine is not about, de facto or de jure, have a legal recognition that Crimea is part of Russia, that the Donbass, Luhansk, Zaporizhia, Kherson are part of Russia, that they are now part of Russia as far as Russia is concerned, legally, it's constitutionally. So it's not like the notion that Putin can come into these talks and go, okay, I'll trade you Zaporizhia for withdrawal of NATO force. No, that's not going to happen. And the people pushing that are just, they're smoking dope. They're off in a land of fantasy. So this is, there's a failure to communicate. To quote the scene from the Paul Newman movie, Cool Hand Luke. What we have here is a failure to communicate. Well, Russia is wanting to end the root causes, and that involves NATO, telling NATO basically to back the hell off, stop coming at us. But the West seemingly is trying to be oblivious to the fact, this is just about Russia trying to rebuild the empire and conquer the world. Oh, for God's sake. The level of stupidity reflected in that is just shocking.
Larry, what Russia can somehow offer to the United States to be acceptable in their eyes to talk about what to what extent they can talk with the United States, or they can provide whatever would be beneficial and reasonable in their minds.
Nothing. Yeah, I mean, if anybody approaches this thinking that there's something that Russia needs to do in order to make the West happy to leave it alone, it's nothing. I love using movie references, but it is um, they provide sort of a reminder of how this works. How these things work. In the movie Independence Day, which is about these aliens invading the Earth, and they had captured one alien, and the president of the United States went down, and he was this airheaded liberal that think all we got to do is just talk, and he's face to face through the glass between them with this alien, and says, "What is it that you want?" And the alien's response, "That you die." Oh, you don't have our best interests at heart. The West is not. The West is not looking to live peacefully with Russia. That they basically they want Russia to be their bitch in prison. They want Russia to be subjugated, and the notion that if we just get together and talk this out, we can all come to an understanding. Bullshit. Not going to happen. So this is, Trump's playing games with this. Putin's going along with it. I think I can understand some of the reasoning. He is not going to adopt an openly confrontational, wanting to fight the West, at least not yet. But, I think at some point, Russia's going to be confronted with a situation where it's going to have no choice but to retaliate. And because the West is not going to stop. I see no signs that the level of vitriol directed against Russia, all things Russian, and the demonization to portray Vladimir Putin as worse than Joseph Stalin is so ridiculous. And yet that's what's happening. Or to it even puts Putin in the same league as Stalin. And then, of course, they trot out the Hitler meme as well. It's just, it's a madness. It's like a form of mental illness that's taken over in the West.
Why does Putin need to meet with Donald Trump if he knows that nothing substantial could come out of the meeting? What is Putin somehow appreciating the connection? That's why he trying to inform the United States, even the president of the United States, that any opportunity that can come along in their mind.
Well, no, I think part of it is one. Putin believes, and some might accuse him of being naive in this regard, that if he can simply talk face to face with Donald Trump, he might be able to persuade him to say, "Hey, look, do you really understand what's going on here? That I want to make sure that you understand our position, where we, Russia, are coming from." There are areas, despite the antagonism of the United States towards Russia over the last 25 years, it's worth noting that I think it started in 2004 that Russia and the United States cooperated closely on a space program. And in fact, Russia was a critical component in that program and in enabling the United States to get back and forth from the space station. Without the Russians, the U.S. would have been just spectators watching. So there is, Putin may be hoping that he can build upon that kind of past cooperation. I did make the point that the date of the meeting is significant. Excuse me, because August 15th is the date that the government of Japan surrendered in World War II. That marks the sort of official date of the ending of the war in the Pacific. And as Russia played a role in that, in fact, you could almost make the case that Truman's decision to drop the atomic bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki had more to do with trying to send a message to Russia to keep Russia from getting too much credit for the end of the war. But Russia had promised President Roosevelt at the Potsdam Conference or the Yalta Conference in February of 1945 that as soon as Russia had settled the war with Germany, it would turn its focus and come assist the United States in taking out Japan, which just a few days after the bombing of Hiroshima on August 6th, Russia invaded Manchuria and swept, really caused a significant retreat of the Japanese. You can build a case that if Truman had not dropped the atomic weapon, that the war would have come to an end in any event with the help of Russia. But again, the animus towards Russia had already started then. So that's the backdrop to this. I wouldn't be surprised if Putin makes that as one of his points to Trump, reminding him that says, we don't need to be enemies. We don't need to be at each other's throat, because there was a time when we were collaborators in fighting a great evil. But he's going to make it clear Russia's not the evil one here.
What's problematic, somehow challenging for Vladimir Putin is to talk deeply with Donald Trump, because Donald Trump doesn't have that much of patience to understand, to go deep into the historical events.
Well, Trump is a different person in private, as opposed to this, buffoon clown that we see in public. He does focus in on people, and he does ask questions, and he is much more, say, accommodating. He's not sort of this abrasive personality that we see on the television. And Putin knows that, based upon his previous meeting with Trump that took back when was it 2017, 2018.
The case of CIA, yeah.
Yeah, and that, I mean, in that case, when they first met and came out, Trump at that time was under the cloud of Russiagate and accused of being a puppet of Putin. And now that it's been exposed that was a Hillary Clinton plot carried out with the help of the CIA and the FBI, Trump's not as susceptible to being accused of that. I mean, there's still a few out there making that accusation, but it no longer carries weight. So Putin does know that Trump's a different person in private when all the cameras are off. So maybe he's counting that he can reach out to that Donald Trump and talk some sense.
What did Russia learn from the past, Larry? Do they have the past as the light for the future?
I can't speak to what they have learned. I can speak to what I hope they have learned. If they've been paying attention. Let's go back to the fall of the Soviet Union and then the emergence of Russia. Despite repeated requests, first by Yeltsin, then by Putin, for Russia to join NATO, they were rebuffed. Despite repeated warnings from Russia not to bring in these other countries into NATO, NATO basically told them, go screw yourself, and has brought in these other countries, including attempts to bring in Ukraine and Georgia, which Russia established clearly as red lines for it. They have NATO has embarked on a steady campaign to boost the military prowess of Ukraine. The West has been involved, was directly involved with overthrowing the democratically elected government of Ukraine in 2014, and aiding and abetting the Ukrainian efforts to start attacking Russian interests. You've had that steady buildup. You've had the rejection of the draft treaty, which Vladimir Putin presented to Joe Biden in December of 2021, a security an agreement to secure Russia in the future going forward. You had the sabotage of the peace talks in Istanbul, end of March, 1st of April of 2022 by the West. You've had several major terrorist attacks in Russia, from the killing everyone, the murder of the daughter of Alexander Dugina, Daria Dugina, Alexander Dugin's daughter, the attack on Crocus City Hall, which killed, around 100, I think over 135 people. You've had the attack on the train. You've had the attempt to kill Vladimir Putin. You had the staging of a war crime at Bucha that was done by British MI6, where they actually picked bodies up, brought them there, planted them around, trying to blame Russia, even though Russia had withdrawn from the place. But you had Putin's gesture of his goodwill, trying to say, "Hey, we're serious about this. We'll withdraw our tanks that were then surrounding Kiev." So, when we go through this litany, and then go back to I didn't even begin to talk about the Minsk II agreement. So, and this current situation we're in is very simple. This is Minsk II on steroids, because at the Battle of Debaltseve, which was in January, February of 2015, the Russians defeated the Ukrainian military, and Germany and the West was panicked, and they hurriedly managed to persuade Putin to call off, to intervene with the authorities in the Donbass and Donetsk and Luhansk to, take their foot off the throat of the Ukrainians. And only later did Angela Merkel, the Chancellor of Germany, admit that this was a ploy. It was a sham. It was done to buy time for Ukraine to rebuild its army. They had no interest whatsoever in actually living in peace with the Russians. This is the destruction of Russia, is what they're all about. And I keep, I feel like I'm Paul Revere or Jeremiah the prophet standing on the wall warning. There is no accommodation to be had with the West, unfortunately. And those that believe that, okay, put that on your list with Santa Claus, the Easter Bunny, and other mythical creatures. The West is not interested in a peaceful accommodation with Russia. They want to destroy it. And I wish it wasn't so dark, but I see nothing in the action of the West. And then here, just in the last 3 months, we saw the failed attempt to kill Putin as he was flying to Kursk. Then, the peace talks are supposed to take place in Istanbul between Russia and Ukraine. And Ukraine, with Western intelligence help, launches Operation Spiderweb, which is a direct attack on Russian strategic bombers. Then 2 weeks later, the decapitation strikes in Iran that are using the same kind of tactics that were employed in Russia. People think that those are somehow unconnected. They're not. I mean, this is a bigger, darker picture than many people want to admit. What we've seen is lies and duplicity and deception on the part of the United States throughout this process. And now, again, here was just last week when they're sending Witkoff to talk peace to Putin. Trump signs an executive order declaring Russia an enemy. I mean, what else did you need to know? For God's sake, you're an enemy. And in tandem with that, then the United States is directly meddling, interfering with Armenia and Azerbaijan, presented, we're trying to bring them together for peace. Horse shit. That's not what this is about. It is about surrounding Russia so that it can take it apart.
I don't know if Witkoff was able to, in 2 hours, to explain what he wants to.
3 hours. Let's be precise. Come on.
3 hours. Yeah, that's really. But when you have someone with no one else, there is no team on the part of the United States. We have an individual going to Russia, talking to officials there, and how it seems to me it was all about the meeting. It wasn't anything about any substantial issue being discussed during the meeting, and because the time is so limited, and these are huge and challenging issues, they cannot discuss that. They may somehow talk a little bit about it, but what was the Witkoff's, in your opinion, what was the nature of the talk between Witkoff and the Russian president? That lately they said that it was a proposal, and they see it as acceptable in the eyes of Russians.
Well, there are still those around Putin that want to have a good relationship with the United States, number one. Number two, despite Western claims and claims out of Washington that this was a meeting that the Russians requested. No, it wasn't. The United States wanted it. Again, I draw the parallel with the Battle of Debaltseve. When it became apparent that the Ukrainians were losing that battle to the militias of the Donbass, and they were backed by Russia, but Russian troops were not in there in any great numbers. I think you had some Wagner folks running around. There was a frantic scramble. Angela Merkel flew to Moscow to talk to Putin and persuaded Putin to, okay, let's come together. We'll sign a peace agreement. Well, we can work this out. Notice that 2 weeks before this meeting, Trump was talking about 50 days. I was hearing the Paul Simon song, 50 ways to leave your lover, 50 days to get a peace. That Russia had 50 days to agree to a ceasefire. And then in a matter of a week, it went from being 50 days to he's got 12 days, 12, 11, no, 10. So, they cut it dramatically short. Well, why? Because Russia is moving very, very fast all along the line of contact. Ukraine is in grave danger of a collapse. And a collapse is going to come much sooner than many in the West thought even possible. That's why Trump pleaded with send Witkoff and said, hey, go convince the Russians. So we have to meet. We have to talk. Russia would prefer to settle this without having to kill more Ukrainians and risk the lives of its own soldiers. And, I think much of that time was spent trying to persuade Putin, yeah, please, this time we're serious. That's why, it wasn't meant as a disrespect for Vladimir Putin, but it reminds me of that, the cartoon character Charlie Brown. If nobody's read that growing up, here's this amiable kid, and his goal, he dreams of kicking the football. And he's got this evil bitch of a friend named Lucy. And I mean, she said, "Oh, I'll hold the football for you." And so Charlie Brown comes running up to kick it. She pulls it away. And he kicks and flies into the air and falls on his butt. That's the U.S. U.S. is Lucy. No matter what. Oh yeah, this time we're really sincere about a peace negotiation. Putin, you're going, wait, you're the ones that walked away from the anti-ballistic missile treaty agreement. You, Donald Trump, you're the one that canceled the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Agreement, the INF agreement, in 2018. Now you're telling me that we're supposed to trust you? That you're serious about negotiations? As I understand, I am not looking for nor encouraging Russia to militarily strike the United States and destroy us. But I fear that that's where it's ultimately going to come, because we have proven ourselves in the United States incapable, at least in the last 20 years, of negotiating and thinking rationally. We're all about trying to destroy others. And people say, "Oh, that's pretty harsh." I say, just go ask the people of Vietnam. Go ask the people of Afghanistan. Go ask the people of Iraq. Go ask the people of Syria. Go ask the people of Libya. I mean, the amount of blood that's on the hands of the United States, ignoring the genocide that was carried out against the Native Americans that inhabited this land before any European settlers showed up. It's almost like it's genetic for us, unfortunately.
I think, Larry, to be realistic, when we put ourselves in the shoes of Putin or his administration, you see Europe, they had Germany and France as guarantors of Minsk II that you've mentioned. These are two countries that somehow Russia felt that they can be more sane in terms of the relationship between the two parties.
Right.
But it wasn't the case. And who's the other player in Europe that is important is the United Kingdom, is the worst enemy of Russia. The worst, I would argue, that they can. So there is no hope in Europe, in my opinion, in the eyes of Russians. So what would be the alternative when your neighbor doesn't care about the security of your region? So what else can they do? You can negotiate with someone else who somehow has the upper hand over Europe. And here, in my opinion, the case of the United States is that case. What else can they do? They can go, these are the final, I would say, the final steps of the total divorce from the West. They're trying to, still, they're hoping something, to achieve something. But these are the final steps. And after that, they're going to say there is no future with the West.
Well, I would hope that Russia has come to that conclusion already, that there is no path forward, at least now, to a relationship, a stable, productive, economic, diplomatic relationship with the West. When you step back and say, okay, what's the beef? I mean, what's at the root of this conflict? Why is there such visceral hatred of Russia? I can understand the visceral hatred of the Soviet Union, at least as it was presented, because the Soviet Union was predicate. It was a communist nation, and it was spreading communism. The communist threat was seen as a threat to Europe and to the world. The communists were busy establishing cells around the world, recruiting people. And again, I think much of that was really overblown, and it was, again, feeding this narrative. But at least you could point to something that was tangible that was going on that made the Soviet Union, which largely was Russia, a threat or a perceived threat. But Russia today, Vladimir Putin is not talking about Lebensraum, about wanting to take more land, that they got to go. He's not talking about conquering other people. You're not whipping the nation up into some ideological fury built around a racist ideology. Russia is back to what I would call a traditional nation founded on Christianity. People say, "Oh, you're being crazy," but I think they hate them because they're Christian. And what's unique about Russia, even though it is Christian, it has found a way that it is not persecuting Muslims. It's not persecuting other religions. It's living in harmony with them. By God, we can't have that either. The West is built upon this notion that you've got to have an enemy, something preferably an external enemy that justifies massive spending on defense budgets and this constant, almost the militarization of society. And these external threats also justify the ability of the government to control people, dictate what they say, what they think, and then put them away in jail otherwise. So it is, that's what I say, it is so at odds with reality, this Western obsession with Russia and failure to take any responsibility whatsoever for provoking this conflict with Russia.
Somehow Russia has achieved something that George Soros and his ilk, or somehow by creating these NGOs, they were telling us we are somehow trying to achieve that, but Russia has already achieved that without interfering in someone's else, internal affairs. These NGOs and the way that they're trying to put these NGOs in other countries to somehow manipulate the situation. They're talking about equality and all of these beautiful words, but Russia has achieved that. It seems to me that it's some sort of enmity. It's some sort of, there is no end to this concept, Larry. They want to, because they're talking about somehow unifying and this idea of globalization, all of that all together, but the objective is totally the opposite. They want to divide people. They don't want to unite people.
Well, that goes to the other sort of threat that Russia presents now, is creating an alternative economic order where the West no longer calls the shots and controls everybody's life. Right now, with the dollar as the international reserve currency, the United States is in a position to punish other countries that don't do what the United States wants it to do. And with economic sanctions, with cutting them off from lines of credit. And, I think Russia, China had long recognized that this was a problem. And they were, trying to, and that's where BRICS emerged initially as an idea, as a concept, but they really hadn't fleshed it out. It's a skeleton with no meat on the bones, no muscle. no sinew. But the start of the special military operation and then the attempt to kill Russia with sanctions awakened not just Russia, but awakened China. To a lesser extent, India. India hasn't awakened to this until just last week when Trump hit them with tariffs. I mean, they've been participating in BRICS and but they thought that they could, massage this and work with the United States and they're not so bad. No, yeah, actually, we're that goddamn bad. We're bad. We're evil. We don't have your best interest at heart. And the same with Brazil a month ago at the BRICS summit, and in the midst of it, getting dinged, hit with tariffs, not because of its economic policies, but because of domestic politics. Yeah. So now, Russia was the visionary in this with respect to BRICS. We got to carve out, be independent. China quickly caught on, but it was India and Brazil were sort of, they were lukewarm about this, but not anymore. They now recognize, damn, these Americans really they want to hurt us. They want to control us, and they're not having it. They are standing up and pushing back, and not just them, but this is why other countries that are joining BRICS, Iran, Vietnam, they're recognizing we got to break free of this Western hegemony, this U.S. controlled system, and that their effort to separate out of that is going to be a source of conflict and potentially war. The United States is not going to give up its control if it can help it, but there are economic realities intruding, and we talked a little bit about those on Friday. That the United States continues to try to sell its debt. Hey, we want to borrow money from y'all, and more countries are going, I don't think so. You're a deadbeat. We're not going to lend you any more money. So what we're witnessing is this disruption of the international order that has basically, first it was controlled by Europe, and then the control moved to the United States after World War II. But it's coming to an end. I'm not saying it's going to end next week or next month, but we're watching the systems beginning, the U.S. financial systems beginning to fall apart. The global South system, BRICS system, is beginning to come into being.
The concept really was that India and Brazil are not that much powerful. Let's put pressure on them. Here is what J.D. Vance said, Larry.
To put significant tariffs on countries like India for buying Russian oil. Are you going to do a similar move to China as well? They're also buying Russian oil.
Well, the president said he's thinking about it, but he hasn't made any firm decisions. Obviously, the China issue is a little bit more complicated because our relationship with China, it affects a lot of other things that have nothing to do with the Russian situation. So the president's reviewing his options and, of course, going to make that decision when he decides.
So, how about India?
Yeah, what might some of those other things be, JD? Oh, rare earth minerals, processed rare earth minerals. So we've got to make sure we draw a distinction. It's not just that you can mine rare earth minerals. Great, you dig it out of the ground. You still have to have them processed so that they can be turned into a final product that can be used in industry. United States defense industry is almost frozen right now because China said, "Oh, you want to attack us? All right, we're not going to give you any more of this. Good luck with that." And there is not an alternative. It's not like they can come up with an alternative. The same with magnets that are critical for not only electric vehicles but some other aircraft and other electronic systems. Well, turns out that India also has some leverage because of what are called API, the precursors for producing final, finished pharmaceuticals. They get a lot. They get a lot of that from India or from China, and then India processes it and turns it into final items that are then shipped to the United States. If that gets cut off, China and India combined could probably cause the deaths of millions of Americans simply by cutting off pharmaceuticals that these people rely upon. So, but what you've seen out of this is, again, the Trump administration, just awful. It's like they've gone out of their way to see what they could do to piss off the Indians. First Trump's taking credit for India for bringing it in. I'm the peacemaker. I brought peace to India and Pakistan. No such thing. And India has consistently said, "What are you talking about?" It's like you taking credit for that. When you looked out in the east this morning, did you see the sunrise, Nima? I did that. That was me. That's Donald Trump, okay? You're taking credit for crap that he didn't do. And then when then they hit him with the tariffs. And so India's saying, "Oh, those F-35 jets we were going to buy? Forget about it. There's some other planes we're going to have. We don't want those either. Oh, our defense minister was going to come meet with Pete Hegseth. Our guy's busy. We don't have time for that." So India's waking up and saying, "Okay, two can play at this game. We're not a bunch of chumps." And then Lula said, "By God, we ought to get together and talk." I really thought that with Brazil becoming the head of BRICS, that it was going to be an uneventful year, that it'd probably go backwards, that wouldn't make any progress. Oh, boy, was I wrong on that. Lula's now, he's got his dander up, as they say. He's energized because he recognized these Americans are crazy, or at least the Trump America is crazy. And we're going to have to push back to defend ourselves.
Somehow amazing, Larry. Donald Trump, whenever talks about the conflict in Ukraine, says it's Biden's war. We know how his behavior during his first term somehow facilitated or caused the conflict that we are witnessing right now in Ukraine. And in my opinion, what's going on with the case of Armenia and Azerbaijan is a geopolitical nuke in that region.
Mm-hmm.
It's gonna blow up. And he's planting this problem in that region. He's gonna live in 3 years, but the problem will continue there, and we're gonna have a lot.
Well, yeah. Again, he's not the one. Let's be clear. Do you think Donald Trump came up with this idea about Azerbaijan and Armenia? That he was a strategic thinker in that? No, this is the deeper, darker forces that are directing U.S. policy. There are some who have thought, I'll say they're thinking strategically, and they're thinking about what can we do to weaken Russia. Because remember, the ultimate target in this now is China. And it's not because China has become a military power intent on conquering the world. It really, it started, under Barack Obama 10 to 12 years ago. Once the realization that, hey, this Chinese economy, it's no longer, they're no longer making a bunch of cheap crap that breaks easily. They've become a genuine industrial power. And in fact, they're better than us. You can go into literature and into film, and you can see the storyline where there's, let's say, a coach who coaches an athlete up, and but the coach is always superior in terms of strength, size, speed. But there comes a point where the mentor or the mentoree surpasses the coach. Now, a normal person would celebrate that you've coached somebody to the point that now they've become better than you. They've exceeded what you could do. But that's not the West. The West wants to subjugate, to control, to keep down. And with China being viewed as becoming this economic power, by God, we can't have that. And so we have to declare China's a threat. China's a military, they're an empire that's trying to devour the world. And it's all projection. It's all the stuff we, the United States, have been doing for the last 80 years, for God's sake. China doesn't have a record of going out and attacking other countries. But, and they say, oh, China's stolen our technology. What the hell do you think the United States just it's the old-fashioned way. We just worked really hard, and we were really ingenious. We're especially smart, not like the rest of please.
It's so amazing that they're talking about Palestinian Authority, and when they don't have any sort of popularity, and they don't believe, these people in Gaza, in Palestine, they don't believe that Palestinian Authority is their representative.
Yeah.
And they want to put them as they are.
Well, the people of Gaza voted for Hamas. And the Western approach is to demonize Hamas. They're a terrorist organization. I tell you what, compare Hamas, take every single attack against Israelis and foreigners who were in Israel over the last 25 years, take every single one of those. And Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, HTS, with al-Shara, has carried out more acts of violence in 5 years than Hamas has in 25 years. And yet, hey, we're sending our diplomats to Syria. We're hugging al-Shara. So, stop with this bullshit about terrorism. Oh, they're discredited because they're terrorists. No, this has nothing to do with that. Excuse my strong language, but it just infuriates me that the double standard, the hypocrisy of the West on this is just staggering. We have terrorism's not the issue. The issue is Hamas is standing in the way of these Zionist crazies who think that they have a right to push the Palestinians into the sea and take control of their land. And Hamas has the balls to stand up and say, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to fight for our rights. And, that's where it stands.
Do you think that the reason that the United States is going after the president of Venezuela is because of Israel, or Israel is part of that?
Oh, remember Juan Guaido? He was the elected president of Venezuela because we, the United States, said so. How's that worked out? So this is just Juan Guaido part 2. All right. This is the unfinished project from the first Trump administration, which failed in Venezuela. And this too will fail. Is Maduro, I'm not Venezuelan. I don't live in Venezuela. So what I think about Maduro doesn't matter. It's what the people of Venezuela think. If they like him, fine. If they want to get rid of him, fine. Take care of you're responsible for your own house. I'm not going to come in and tell you how to clean, what food you should eat, what room you should sleep in, what programs you should watch on television. Run your own house. I'll run my own house, and you know what? We'll get along just fine. That unfortunately, the United States, that is not the U.S. policy when it comes to foreign policy. Man, we are the ultimate. We're the, and this is not an insult to mother-in-laws, but mother-in-laws sometimes do have a reputation for meddling in the affairs of other families. We're like a psychotic mother-in-law. We got to tell everybody else what to do, what to wear, where to work, where to travel, what to see, and people start saying, wait a second, we're going to push back on that. So this is taking out Maduro, I believe, is all about trying to get control of Venezuelan oil for the West.
Yeah, they're putting blame on the president of Venezuela, Maduro, and we had the president of Mexico coming out that there is no evidence.
I just said, what did she say?
She said that there is no evidence or an investigation of unfounded allegations of Maduro's ties to the cartel, to this cartel in
the Mexican cartel. I mean, yeah, that. Now you could make a case in Colombia of the relationship between the Colombian and Mexican cartels. Yeah, absolutely. But Venezuela's never been a big source for growing cocaine or heroin or poppies for heroin. Just it's never been the big player there. What the United States is just upset because back when I was with CIA, the president of Venezuela had been a fully signed up CIA asset. So we controlled that country. We had them on the payroll. Now, with Hugo Chavez and Maduro, yeah, we're getting the pushback from our past misdeeds, and there's a tendency that if you're controlling somebody, once they break free of you, they go out of their way to show that they're independent, and sometimes do stupid things or wrong things.
Larry, do you believe that the Biden administration could have done the same as the Trump administration did? There is no red line for Netanyahu, in my opinion. He's doing whatever he wants in Gaza.
Yeah.
But that wasn't the case, in my opinion, with the Biden administration. They tried to manage something with Netanyahu, little pressure here and there, but after all, that wasn't just giving some sort of no red line to the Israelis. They're doing whatever they want.
Well, I disagree. I mean, it was Biden was completely enabling the Israelis, completely, and did nothing to rein them in. Providing them bombs that they could drop on civilians. Trump. It's just a continuation of the policy that existed. I grant you, Trump's approach is probably more extreme than that of the Biden administration, and you could make the case that there. I don't think there were any red lines for Biden, but Trump is complete enabler of the Zionist project. Biden may have had some limitations on that, but the result has been the same. You've got the official statistics of 60,000 plus dead Palestinians, I think, is extremely low. It could be upwards of 200,000 dead.
Thank you so much, Larry, for being with us today.
Yeah, we always start the week with all this cheery news. People, boy, I feel good after that. You say, oh man, I need to go take a shower.
Yeah. Do you know on Friday, the meeting between the two presidents would be on Friday, if I'm not mistaken?
Right. I'm not sure what time.
What time then?
Because remember, we're so you're an hour ahead of me.
Yeah.
Alaska is, I believe, 4 hours behind East Coast time, 5 hours behind your time. So if they meet and conclude by 1 p.m., in the afternoon in Alaska, that's going to be 6 p.m. your time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So everybody's anxious, that's dominating. What's going to happen?
Nothing burger.
Yeah. Yeah. The expectations are going to be raised. And then when it kind of unfolds, they're going to be going,